started. We're just waiting for a few more people to join in. I want to welcome everyone to our session today. My name is Jennifer Wilson, and I'm the Executive Director of Cassie and Friends. Thank you so much for sharing your Saturday night with us, or afternoon, depending on where you are. This session tonight is called Putting on Your Life Jacket, Self-Care for Caregivers, Parenting a Child with Rheumatic Disease, and more. And I am so excited about this session tonight. We had the opportunity to meet with our speaker a couple days ago, and as a mom to two young girls myself, who don't have a chronic disease, I already feel like everyone will get, no matter who you're parenting or what you've kind of come to this session with. You're going to get so much out of this tonight, and especially the deep experience that Lisa Greene has to share with us, specific to the Cassie and Friends community. So first, I just wanted to start by letting everyone know, and I loved that people were already introducing themselves in the chat box. We have 42 cities across Canada represented today. So families all across Canada, you can see on the map there, as well as a few international attendees. And when I was looking through the registration list, I was so excited to see a number of families who have been with Cassie and Friends for many years, who I recognize their names from family days of 5-6 years ago, as well as brand new families from across Canada. And I think what that says to me is that no matter where you are on your journey with rheumatic disease or parenting, this session, like parenting, will always be relevant. The issues that we face don't go away, and they change and they surprise us. And so it's so nice to have everyone here today together. And for those of you who've just joined, please do take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat box. You can share the name of your child, their diagnosis, but also to remind ourselves that tonight is for you, the caregivers. We thought it might be fun to share something about yourself, because we all want to share about our kids. So in the chat box, you could also just take a moment to share your favorite color and why that's your favorite color. And mine is aqua, and it is because my grandma, who's no longer with our family, but she had the most outlandish jewelry that she loved to wear, and all of it was aqua. So that has been my favorite color since I was very little. For those of you who aren't familiar with Cassie and Friends, I just wanted to take a minute to let you know about our organization. So what makes Cassie and Friends, I think, unique and really special is that every day we get up and we work 100% for kids and families affected by rheumatic diseases. So we are solely focused on pediatric rheumatic diseases. And I think what else makes us really special is that we are led by parents, we're led by youth who are affected themselves, and we work so closely with the pediatric rheumatic disease clinics across Canada. And so there's such amazing synergy between Cassie and Friends and the families and the youth and the teams, and we're all working together towards our mission and our vision, which is to transform the lives of kids and families, and really to see the pain-free future that all kids with rheumatic disease deserve. Tonight wouldn't be possible without our sponsors, so I just want to give a really quick shout out to Nicola Wealth, AbbVie, Amgen Canada, Roche, and Sobi. Their support has allowed us to do 15 of these sessions so far. And I just wanted to let you know that if you are new to Cassie and Friends or have missed some of the past sessions, we actually have a really amazing growing resource section on our website where you can access all of the past webinar recordings, as well as read the questions and answers that happened both live and afterwards. So a really amazing resource on, as you can see, nutrition, mental health, physical activity, methotrexate, and more to come. So please do visit our website. Lastly, before we get into the presentation. We have an online support network, and what's really exciting about this is that it is available to you 24/7. It's a safe, secure community where you can not only ask questions, but you can also read and learn from other people's experience. And if you connect with people tonight in your breakout rooms and you'd like to keep in touch with them, then that's a great place to carry on the conversation. So you can use the QR code on the screen, but you can also go to cassieandfriends.ca/support network for information on how to join. Okay, so before I introduce Lisa, I'm going to just share a few housekeeping notes. So everyone should have their mics muted during the presentation until you're into your breakout rooms, and then for the question period at the end. But if you would like to turn on your camera, we would love to see who's out there. And it's totally optional, so it's up to you whether or not you'd like to. But if you want to turn on your camera, then we would all be happy to see your faces out there. If you have questions, down below you'll see a button called chat. And so you can, at any time, that's where you've been sort of introducing yourselves, etc. You can ask questions. We'll be watching it. After Lisa's presentation, we're going to go into breakout rooms, come back to Lisa, and then we'll do a live Q&A at the end. So you can either enter in a question along the way, or you can save it until that question period. If you have any trouble with your internet connectivity, just remember you have a dial-in number in your registration email. So even if you can't see the presentation, if anything goes wrong, you can just dial in and listen. As I mentioned, we're going to be having breakout rooms. So when Lisa will let everyone know when we're transitioning to that, but just keep your eye open for a pop-up screen that will invite you to your breakout room. And then all you have to do is accept. And if at any point you get kicked out of your breakout room or something happens, on the bottom where the chat box is, there's a button that says breakout room, and then you can just rejoin. And of course, use the chat box if you're having any trouble at all. Within the breakout rooms, we're so excited that everyone will have a chance to talk about some of the skills and things that Lisa's going to be sharing, and introduce yourselves and get to know some other families. We've really worked to carefully select the breakout rooms so that you have lots in common. And when we get into the breakout rooms, everyone will be introducing themselves, and we just ask that everyone sort of keep to about, like 3 to 4 minutes introducing yourselves so that we all have time to share in that room. And lastly, we really just want to remind everyone that we're here tonight in a very special hour and a half that rarely happens with parents, to just focus in on ourselves and our feelings. And so with that, of course, we all want information, and we want the best for our children, and we want to find out all the information, but we just would ask everyone to really refrain from providing medical advice or anything like that tonight. And just remember that tonight we're here to talk about us. Okay, so with that, I'm very excited to introduce Lisa Greene. And Lisa Greene is actually familiar to the Cassie and Friends community, as we were very, very fortunate a few years ago to have Lisa come up from her home in Washington to speak at a Cassie and Friends Family Day event. And it was the memory of the impact she had on the parents in that room that made us want to invite her back on this national platform and international platform to share her experience with all of you. What's really stand out about Lisa is not only has she written 4 books on the topic that we are sharing tonight and logged 1,600 hours of work experience as a family life educator, most importantly, Lisa has truly walked the talk and is a mother to 2 amazing young adults now with chronic disease themselves, and has really, really, deep experience and understanding of the content that she's about to share with you tonight from a very deep and personal place. And it comes through so much when you speak with Lisa. I just found she's so genuine, and I'm so excited for you to all hear from her. So with that, I will pass it to Lisa Greene.
Thank you so much, Jen. That's very kind of you. Let's see, I'm going to get my slides up here. Okay, I think we're there. Are you seeing them okay here?
We are.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much again for that warm welcome. And it's truly my honor to be here with all of you and to be in your living room or your dining room or your kitchen or wherever I'm being beamed into. So thank you for welcoming me. Well, a couple of years ago, when I was actually designing this workshop, I was working on a slide, which you'll be seeing about coping with stress and anxiety. And the phone rang. And I got a call from my daughter, who was at the time on the way to a camp where she was going to be volunteering as a counselor. And it was about 6 hours away from home. And she said to me, "Mom, the bus rolled over, but I'm fine. I'm scratched up and I'm bleeding, but I'm okay. The other kids are okay too. We just have some scratches and minor injuries, but we're all okay." And every parent just dreads a moment like that, right? And so I just sat there stunned and I'm like, wow, take a deep breath. I'm staring at my slide that has, notes and tips for dealing with anxiety. And I took a deep breath and I went out to my back patio and I just sat down in the trees and looked at the trees and outside and took a deep breath and just said, okay, this is really scary, but I'm going to be grateful. I'm going to choose to be grateful right now because she's okay and the kids are okay and it could have been really bad. And so that's just one small example of the power of some of the things I'm going to teach you today. But as I sat there in that chair, thinking about what had just happened, and as I sit here in this chair with you today, it brings me back to another day long ago, 20 years ago, in fact, actually 22 years ago, in fact, when my son Jacob was born. And the doctors said to my husband and I, "I'm sorry, but your son has cystic fibrosis." And I imagine that all of you can remember a moment such as this, whether it's been recent. I see in the chat that some of you have been recently diagnosed, or others maybe a long time ago. But we will never forget that moment as long as we live. So a little bit about cystic fibrosis. It's a genetic disease that primarily affects the lungs and the pancreas. And there's a lot of medical care involved with CF. It is genetic. Jacob is a senior in college in California. Our daughter Casey, who also has cystic fibrosis, she's 20 and she's attending the University of Washington. And they take about 18 or so different medications each day between them, including inhaled medications. They use a machine to break up the thick, sticky mucus that's characteristic of cystic fibrosis. And they do breathing treatments to also treat directly the bacteria that can accumulate in the lungs, which is also a characteristic of cystic fibrosis. So, we have our challenges. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of stress, but the kids are doing okay. And I'm very grateful for having good medical care. And I have a lot of hope that my kids are going to outlive me. Right now, they're on a new medication that actually will extend their life expectancy. And I'm really, really grateful for that. It's been life-changing for us. But their outcome depends on many factors, including luck, how well they take care of themselves, and of course, the medications. And it's a lot to manage. I know I don't know about the chronic illness that you all are dealing with, and maybe most of you don't know about cystic fibrosis. But I will say that there are a lot of similarities. There's a lot of stress. We're all dealing with the medical system. We're dealing with insurance. We're also dealing with life. We're dealing with jobs and school. And now, of course, we're dealing with COVID. So there's a lot of things that we're dealing with, a lot of worries, a lot of fears, a lot of anxiety, and also a lot of joy. I mean, even good stress can bring, good things can bring stress. And so life can get pretty crazy at times. And sometimes it's just a little bit too much. We may get stressed out. We may get bummed out. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be discussing some tools and some ideas about how to take care of ourselves when our bodies and our emotions are telling us that it's just too much, that we've just had it, and that it's just really, really hard. So chronic illness, whether it's in yourself, whether you have a chronic illness or a family member has chronic illness, affects them more than just the body. Our well-being is tied to our physical, emotional, and our mental and our spiritual selves. They're interconnected. So the path to wellness has to take all of these parts into account. Unfortunately, our medical model only focuses on the physical aspects of ourselves. So it's up to us to really just jump in there and learn and make sure that the other aspects of our bodies are being taken care of and in ourselves and in our loved ones. Because our children, particularly if we're talking about as parents, they're going to learn from our examples. And so today I'm going to be focusing mostly on the emotional aspect, and I'm going to touch upon the spiritual aspect a little bit towards the end. And we're going to be doing some exercises together about 2/3 of the way through. And I'm going to just sort of power through some foundational slides that are going to kind of just give us some good information, and then we'll just have that time to connect and share and learn together. So let's just talk about emotions and grief really for a little while. So at diagnosis, emotional responses include 3 phases. And I know that you can relate to these, you remember these, you may even be in the middle of some of these. The 3 phases are initial shock, the initial reaction, the shock, the disbelief, the I can't believe this just happened. And then comes the distress, after we sort of recover from the shock, then it's like, wait a minute, what's going on? I'm so confused. I'm angry. I'm worried. I'm fearful. And sometimes depression hits. And then we move into adjustment. We pick ourselves up. We say, okay, I'm going to learn about this. I'm going to learn about the options. I'm going to learn about treatments. And we learn about coping. Strong emotions are normal throughout the course of living with a chronic illness. They come and they go, they come and they go. And grief emotions are a human emotional reaction to loss. Now, each one of us can actively work through the grieving process by being aware of it, understanding it, and trusting it. And that's what we're going to really work on today. We're going to really learn how to understand our emotions. As I mentioned, they're normal. We all feel a wide range of emotions, sometimes on a daily basis. But we live in a world that doesn't really value all feelings equally. Anger and sadness in particular, we may get messages from friends and family like, calm down, toughen up, get over it, be strong. Now they mean well, right? They mean well. But such statements send a clear message that these feelings aren't okay. And we might even start saying these things to ourselves. So these messages can suggest that feelings like this shouldn't be expressed and that, we should ignore or we should dismiss these feelings. Unfortunately, these kinds of messages fail to recognize that there's value in all of our emotions. Emotions are simply telling us what's going on. It's sort of a barometer about what's going on inside. And I love this quote by Heather Shoemaker. She wrote the book, It's Okay Not to Share and Other Renegade Rules for Raising Competent and Compassionate Kids. She said, true happiness is not about being happy all the time, but about having the skills to cope with the full range of human emotion. And now, while she suggests allowing our children to feel the full range of emotions, this also applies to us as a parent. And certainly, we're going to learn how to express our emotions in a healthy way. So how we express our emotions is one thing, but allowing ourselves to feel our emotions is another. And so as we learn to feel our feelings and we learn to express them in appropriate ways and react to them in healthy and appropriate ways, we're also teaching our children how to do this. And what an amazing gift to be teaching our children healthy emotional intelligence skills. And there's a lot more at stake in life with expressing our emotions than just, feeling good about our lives and feeling really connected to who we are as human beings. our emotions can actually affect how our lives turn out, because our feelings can affect how we think, and how we think can affect our decision making. Of course, our decision making affects how we behave, and how we behave affects what happens to us and how things turn out, and what are the consequences in our lives. And so it's really important that we think about the beginning of this chain, our feelings and how it affects how our lives turn out. But it's interesting because there's also our feelings affect how we think, but how we think can also affect our feelings. And so in that moment when I got the news about Casey being in the bus accident, my feelings were out of control, and they were crazy and anxious and just running away. And so when I went outside and I sat down and I took a deep breath and I calmed myself, and I just sat there and I looked at the trees and the beauty outside, and I made a conscious decision to be grateful that my daughter was okay before I picked up the phone and started making the calls to the other parents. I was able to actually affect how my feelings were in that moment, which then had a good effect on my decision making. And so you can see how all of this can affect how things turn out for us in our lives. So there's basically 4 steps to understanding and managing our own emotions. And again, I'm just touching on this lightly because I just want to bring to your awareness some of these ideas, so that, and then point you in a direction to dig more deeply if you want to on your own. And so these little notes right here are from the exercise Understanding and Managing Emotions. It's a very powerful set of worksheets on pages 3 to 10 of your handouts, which were emailed to you, and which the link is also in the chat box. And so you don't need to turn to that now, but I encourage you, if you have time later tonight, or maybe over the week, just take a look at this and just read the handouts and do the exercises. So 4 steps to understanding and managing our own emotions would be: first, learn more about our emotional life. Pay attention to the messages that we received about feelings when we were growing up. A lot of the ways that we respond to emotions and the things that we tell ourselves are actually from our parents. And so when we start really thinking about what these messages were, we can realize that, wow, our parents, we love them. They're, basically, good people doing the best they could with what they knew, just like us. I mean, we're doing the best we can with what we know, as parents. And I can tell you, I love my children. They love me. We have a great relationship. But, if you were to ask them in a private room, well, tell us about your mom. I mean, they could list several things where they wish that I would have done a better job for them. And it's always going to be that way. But we can learn a lot by looking back and reflecting on the messages that we were given growing up. We want to learn to express our feelings directly and clearly, and not when we're in the middle of the emotions. And that's one of those little really valuable pearls that I hope you take away from this workshop, is the time to express our feelings is not when we're in the middle of it, because generally we're not going to say what we really want to say, right? We're going to end up saying things we really don't mean to say, and we're not going to have a chance to think about how the message should be delivered. And when we're triggered by emotion, it's really hard to think clearly. And so it's really a lifelong process. A lot of it depends on personality and how expressive you are, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. So a lot of things go into how we express our feelings. But it's really worth digging into and learning some basic tools to express our feelings clearly and directly. And also to identify our defenses and learn to experience our feelings directly. Again, that worksheet will help give you some tools to do some of those things. But right now, tonight, we're really just talking about sort of a real baseline about emotions, and then we're going to learn some different tools for self-care, so that when we're feeling those emotions, when we're feeling flooded, we're going to have a place to go with them. And hopefully, if we're taking good care of ourselves, we won't feel flooded and out of control to start with. So let's talk a little bit about grief, because grief, when we experience something like a diagnosis or a loss, or even with COVID. I mean, grief is a really, grief isn't actually one emotion. It's really, it's a set of emotions. It's a bunch of emotions. It's a normal response to the loss of someone or something significant. Maybe, a lot of us have been grieving over the last year and a half and still ongoing with COVID. A lot has been lost. And so grief is that process of feeling and healing and then recovering from these significant losses. And I love the quote by Queen Elizabeth II: grief is the price we pay for love. And of course, she has been walking through her own very significant grief process right now with the loss of her husband. Now, many of us have heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she originally wrote her book. I think she was one of the earliest ones who talked about stages of grief. Her book was called On Death and Dying, and I think it was written in like 1969, so a long, long time ago. And she had a long, rich career filled with research about grief. Basically, she started by studying families who were dealing with loss from chronic illness, I believe. And now her stages of grief are really around losing someone to death. And so she kind of noticed that there was a pattern. And we've heard about these stages: denial and isolation, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean we like what happened, but it means that we come to accept that that is the reality. Now, it's not a linear process. It's not this step goes to that step, goes to the next step. It can go all over the place. We can be happy one moment, or, at least calm, and then we can be angry, and then we can be sad, and then we can be bargaining. And, so we can be all over the board with our feelings. There's been a lot of writing about the stages of grief, and maybe you've seen this one. We start with loss and hurt and shock and numbness, which I've talked about, and anger and fear. And I think many of you can probably relate to, this feeling, this U-shaped journey, I guess we have here. And then, we kind of hit the bottom, and then we start moving forward a little bit, one step at a time, and we move into strengths, new patterns, some hope, and actually adjustment. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but in my experience, life isn't quite that tidy. I think this is actually the real grief loss experience of what this really is like. And so knowing this is really helpful. I learned about this gosh, I can't even tell you, probably, let's see, my son is 22, and he was about 4 years old when I started learning about normalizing this experience. And I remember having gone through so many hard times where I would just get triggered at something, and I would burst into tears, and I would read something about cystic fibrosis and a young person passing young, and I would just start crying, and I would be like, wow, I thought I'd kind of accepted this, and I thought I was going crazy. I thought, what is wrong with me? And then I started learning, and I actually went to a workshop like this, but it was for cystic fibrosis. It was live back then. It wasn't COVID. And I learned about, the grieving stages of grief, and a couple other ones that I'm going to talk with you about that really had some lights go off in my mind to just help me recognize, wow, it's normal. It's okay. I'm okay. I'm not going crazy. There's light, and I can heal. And it really gave me a lot of hope, and just understanding this process really helped me out a lot. So one grief model that I stumbled on actually at that conference that I really liked a lot, because I think it applies to us a bit more than Dr. Kubler-Ross's model, is the idea of chronic sorrow. It's different from Dr. Kubler-Ross because it doesn't apply to grief that follows losses with an endpoint or a finality. It's more like what we deal with, right? We deal with stages of losses. Maybe like for me with my children, we've had multiple hospitalizations. We've had dealing with losses where my kids couldn't do certain things that their peers could do. There were limitations physically because of their lung function or their current physical health, the status of their physical health. And so, when the loss is ongoing, the grief and the sorrow that we experience becomes chronic, and it becomes this real, bit of a roller coaster. And so what I really liked a lot about the idea of chronic sorrow is that discrepancy between, and I've underlined it here, I hope you can see it okay, is that discrepancy between what is perceived as reality and what continues to be dreamed of, or what's called shattered dreams. It's called shattered dreams. And so, this is what's interesting, is where we can have secondary losses when we're dealing with a chronic illness, or, in the case of a loss of life with a loved one. There's a lot of other losses besides just the health. If it's a spouse maybe that has a chronic illness, maybe we lose some financial help, or maybe we lose support in the home. Maybe that person can't help us do yard work like we used to be able to, together. And so there's all these secondary losses that are called shattered dreams. And that chronic sorrow can include feelings of being triggered back to the initial trauma. There's another cyclical grieving model that I stumbled upon in my family life education. I have a master's degree in family life education. And in my studies with that program, I stumbled on this model. And I really like it a lot because it takes into account what's called the family life cycle. And really what that's about is it's just over time. It's what we as families and individuals experience over time, over a lifetime. And so you can see in the middle, we have our shattered dream, whatever that may be. And then we have in this middle circle here, we have these feelings of grief, all the different feelings that grief, the different feelings within the grieving process. But then we have over time, the different stages of life, family with young children, family with adolescents, launching children and moving on, and then family later in life. And so, for example, in the early days when I was writing this material and writing my parenting books, and I wrote them how to raise children with chronic illnesses, which is the workshop I did when I saw you live a few years ago. I wrote that because I needed it so badly. I needed to learn, how do I get my child to take their medication? How do I deal with a kid who doesn't want to do breathing treatments? How do I talk with my kid about cystic fibrosis in a way that's hopeful but yet realistic, because they need to know the truth. I had all these questions. And so that program, Family with Young Children, I was really focusing in at that time on those kinds of questions. Obviously, things change, family with adolescents. So I had to go through almost a whole new grieving process. Like, what does it look like now having teenagers, that have to do an hour in the morning and an hour not each night of breathing treatments, when their peers aren't having to do that, and they're having to do all these things to manage their condition, but yet now they're also having this heavy homework load and all these things, and that would just bring me right back to that grief and to those shattered dreams and that sense of why us, why are we dealing with this, why me, all the things that we can ask ourselves so normally when these things are happening. And so again, this is really normal. There's nothing wrong with you. And it helps me to expect it. I can kind of feel those things coming on as my son is going to be graduating from college. Actually, he's in California, and my daughter and I actually get to go to the graduation. Only the two of us can be there. But I know that despite the joy and excitement and all of that I have, there's going to be a tinge in my soul of I've come to recognize it, of grief. It's just, there's this grief there that as hard as I try, it's still there because the reality is still there of what we have to deal with as a family. And, just things that aren't as I'd hoped that they would be. And those shattered dreams are still there, even though I cope with them well. We're human and those feelings are still there. And so with anxiety and chronic illness, I just want to touch upon this. Experiencing anxiety is normal. However, excessive and or continual stress and anxiety can cause our adrenal systems to we just get stuck. I mean, our body is a machine. It's a biological machine, but it is a machine, and it can just sort of get stuck in the on position. And so it's really important for us to recognize this and to recognize the symptoms of anxiety, and also to take good care of ourselves, which I know I'm running through this really fast because I want to get to the good stuff. I want to get to the part about how we can, reduce our stress and how we can set our lives up in such a way to be able to handle the stressors in our lives. And the good news is that low to moderate anxiety can be successfully managed with good coping skills, which is what we're going to talk about. And I do want to point out these two resources. And these are my just hands down favorite resources ever for anxiety. And interesting enough, they're in Canada. You all do a fantastic job, I believe, as a country, focusing on mental health. I think you all and England do a much better job than America on like really making mental health, education accessible and making it okay to talk about. And so, I'm grateful to your countries both for that. So fantastic resources. Feel free to take a picture of these, by the way, any of these slides if you want to. And I can provide the slides to Jen, later if you guys want me to, and then you can share them. So I see Jen nodding. So great. Okay. So so anxiety. So just to real quick, how to know if you or a family member needs help. There's normal anxiety, there's normal depression, sadness, blues. I can get the winter blues. I can get post-vacation. I call it post-vacation depression, but it's not really depression. It's just the blues, from coming back from vacation, like, I'm back into the real world, right? But how do we know when it's gone from just sort of normal everyday anxiety into something, more serious that really needs to be paid serious attention to? You can see the list here. These are the signs of an anxiety disorder. And then here are the signs of depression. And so these are things that you've probably heard before, you've probably read before. Certainly, in your clinics, you may be getting a short questionnaire that can screen you for anxiety and or depression. I hope that you do. We do, our CF clinics do screen us, both parents now and our children, for anxiety and depression. And so certainly if you're, having any challenges with this, please reach out. Please reach out for help. Please reach out to your doctors. Please reach out to therapy. And we've got like suicide lines here in America. Jen, what do you have? Do you have anything offhand that you can offer, from in Canada that you could mention here?
Yeah, we have, after your presentation, we have a slide with a few resources that we recommend. And I was actually when you were talking, I was just about to put into the chat, has anyone had anything like that in clinic, a questionnaire that they've received about like caregiver mental health? And I'm interested to hear, because all of the clinics are very different. And so it'll be interesting to see what is available. But definitely that's something that we're all very aware of as a lack in rheumatology, is mental health support all around. Like we would love to see it as part of the, clinic team, where we have access to maybe, physiotherapy and a specialized nurse, etc. But in the meantime, at the end of the session, we will share some resources and continue, like if anyone has specific areas they'd like us to focus on, then that's how we direct our activity as well.
Yeah, thank you. Fantastic. I'm seeing in the chat, it doesn't look like you guys do that. So, wow, maybe this is a call to action. I don't know. I don't mean to add to your plate, but I mean, and there are short forms. There's like I'm not good at remembering the names of them, but there's like the GAD-3 and the GAD-5 for anxiety. And, so there's different like short form, like, you know, researched, validated questionnaires that are quick to answer that, at least give the doctors and the social workers an idea if something's going on, and then they can address it. And maybe it's just a matter of just checking in, but at least that check-in happened. And so I'd be happy to help you, Jen, if you wanted to find out some of that maybe you could, talk with your clinics about, and maybe something that could really benefit families because it's important. So, okay, so thank you so much for that. All right, so now that was kind of the bad news part. I don't really like starting with the bad news, but I thought I'd just get it out of the way. So it's the bad news, then the good news, right? So the good news, and there is a lot of good news. The good news is that, after a traumatic event, many people report positive psychological changes. This is actually referred to as post-traumatic growth. And there's a lot of good research coming through about this. And it's also about resilience. I mean, there's been resiliency studies going on for many, 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 many years. And I think, there's a lot of similarities with the resiliency studies as well, and post-traumatic growth. I mean, maybe it's a new word for the same thing. But anyway, the good news is resilience and post-traumatic growth are positive things that can happen. These changes in one's outlook about life often lead to better coping skills and improved daily functioning. And you can see the long list of post-traumatic growth, that we can be considered positives. Some of the ones that I appreciate are closer relationships with loved ones. I would say increased social support. And I would say more openness to new experiences, and optimism. I mean, for me, I wouldn't be doing this work if it weren't for the experiences that I've gone through and we've gone through as a family. So this really gives me hope. So let's talk about resilience. So the common definitions of resilience, and you can see a picture of this rubber band here, are the ability to bounce back, and the tendency for a child or family or individual to rebound, right? To resume usual activity. And that's all great. I like that. It's wonderful. However, I prefer the alternative definition of resilience, which is the ability to bounce forward rather than just becoming the same as what we were and coming back. It's becoming better, even more. And this is the idea of that post-traumatic growth. And a good example of this is Abraham Lincoln. Now, I recognize you all are in Canada, and I was laughing with Jen when we were going through the slides, like, oh, wow, okay, do you guys know who Abraham Lincoln is in Canada? And she said, because I laughed, I'm like, wait, you're not America. And she said, yeah, we know who Abraham Lincoln is. So I'm going on faith that you do. And he was really an amazing person in many ways. He's a great example of not just surviving, but thriving. And so starting in 1832, he ran for public office, and he was defeated many, many, many times. So 1832, finally 1860, he was elected president of the United States. And of course, it was during the Civil War. Well, the Civil War broke out while he was president. And he was one of the most important presidents in our history. But through it all, he suffered countless personal sorrows, including the loss of all 4 sons and his only grandson. Not surprisingly, President Lincoln suffered from clinical depression. Throughout his life, he suffered from clinical depression, yet he persevered. And of course, knowing the end of his story, he was assassinated 5 years later after becoming elected as president. That makes his quote all the more poignant. In the end, it's not the years in your life that count, it's the life in your years. And this is a quote that I've really clung to. In fact, somebody sort of changed it. I'm not sure who did, but in the CF community, we say in the end, it's not the the number of breaths in your life that count. It's the life in your breaths, or something like that. So that quote gives me a lot of hope and is really empowering. So coping with stress and stressful events is an important life skill, especially with the stress that we manage and carry due to chronic illness. How we cope with stress and trauma is an individual situation. Each person is different, including within couple relationships. Our spouses and partners are different. Our children are going to handle stress different. Our parents are going to handle stress different. You know, we are all different people. And the amount of stress a person can handle before breaking is also an individual matter. There's biology that goes into it. I mean, our adrenal systems are based upon genetics. And so there's that part of it as well. The ability to cope well is based on many things, including family backgrounds, our life experiences, our temperament, our biology, our prior amount of trauma. And so different coping skills are going to work better for some of us, better than others. And so don't quit trying if something isn't helping right away. You have to try a lot of different things. But as you experiment, you'll start to realize what seems to soothe you, what seems to calm you down. Now, coping skills can be learned, but they take practice and commitment. And so it's kind of like Jen and we were laughing about my ukulele that you might be able to see in the background, right? I just love it. I pluck it. I play with it. I know a few chords, but I just haven't had the practice and commitment to just do that 10,000 hours worth of practice to get really, really good at it. But I enjoy it, and I'm a work in process. So coping skills can also be learned with a little bit of practice and commitment. And most of us have already developed at least a few good coping skills by the time we're adults, right? I mean, we learn to develop them along the way. And so focus on these first. And a lot of these you'll recognize. You'll go, oh, yeah, I do that. But I would encourage you to also try some new ones. And here's a caveat. We always want to give ourselves and others grace when me and they blow it. And we're not coping with stress well. We're human. We're all human. We all say things we don't mean. We all get flooded with emotion and just, step in it and say and do the wrong things. And, the beauty of being human is to be forgiving and ask for forgiveness and give forgiveness. And so, that's just an important part of the human condition. So go ahead and turn to your exercises, page 11 to 13. And we're going to take it just a minute here. I'm hoping you had a chance to do this ahead of time because it saves us a lot of time. And because we're going to talk about these next two little written exercises over the break, which we're going to take here in just a minute. And so hopefully you had a chance to think of a stressful event, and it doesn't have to be like the most stressful event in your life. It might be just something that happened yesterday, like your car wouldn't start, or whatever. I mean, so the task of this activity is to list a stressful event and then list a couple of actions, maybe 2 or 3 actions that you did. What did you do to cope with the stressful event? And then on the right-hand side, you can see that there's some coping strategies. At the bottom, they're listed here. We can ignore the problem, and this is temporarily ignoring the problem, by the way. That's kind of what I did when I went outside and sat outside, right? I didn't just jump into dealing with calling the camp and calling, the other parents and calling everyone. I mean, I walked outside, I sat down, I took a deep breath. I ignored it for a moment. I distracted myself. I looked at the trees. I tried to calm myself down. And then, I was able to think clearly about what do I need to do? Who do I need to call? Reframing, looking at it in a new or different way. I also did that actually when I said, I'm going to choose to be grateful instead of, oh my gosh, my daughter just got into a bus accident. I can't believe it. This is just terrible. What just happened to me? Oh my gosh, I can't believe, right? Which would be me, So instead it's like, deep breath. Okay. I just going to really focus on the fact that my daughter is okay. This is not good, but she's okay. And it could have been a whole lot worse. And then our different kinds of support, which we're going to talk about on another slide. This particular one talks about spiritual support, social support, and formal support. So hopefully you had a chance to do that and take a look at that. I'll go ahead and just give you like 1 minute to do that because I want to keep us moving. And I see some people looking down. I'm assuming you're writing. I'll move on here in just a second. A minute's a really long time when there's silence, isn't it? Okay. All right. So now we're going to move on to another exercise. I'm going to skip around a little bit because there's just no way for me to do this all in one slide. So the next exercise we're going to be working on is on pages 14 through 17. And I'm going to ask you to take a look at the top, and I've got it highlighted here, the top two questions, the take time for yourself section. So that's the area that we're looking at, but I'm going to backtrack. All right. So, whoops, let me backtrack. So good self-care increases resilience and, of course, is the first line of defense against stress. When we're taking good care of ourselves, we're a lot more able to physically, emotionally, and spiritually handle the stressors that hit us. And so not only is it important to have good coping skills for when stress hits us, but it's important to be mindful of ongoing self-care on a regular basis. It kind of like builds up our coping ability. It builds up like a nice armor so that we are better able to handle stress when it happens. And so here's a list of some things that you can do that are examples for good physical self-care. Here are some examples that you can do for good emotional self-care. And here are some examples that you can do for good spiritual self-care. And I'll give you a moment to kind of take a look at those. And again, you can take a snapshot of this if you want to have that list. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is go into your breakout groups with this form, this Planning for Resilience form. And on page 17 of your handouts, there's a list of 80 self-care ideas. So a lot of these ideas were also on that slide I showed you that was, segmented into physical, emotional, and spiritual. And so the idea being here is I would really like for you to talk with your group about, the questions in that resilience worksheet. Identify 2 things that you'd like to do for yourself as soon as possible. And then identify 2 things you'd like to do for yourself sometime in the future. And also, if you have time, I'd like to talk with you about, just how do you handle stress? I mean, how have you been handling it? And, where can you go with that? I mean, are you feeling like, yeah, I'm handling it pretty good. And, and here are some new things I'm learning, or yeah, I'm not handling it that great. And here are some of the struggles I'm having, and some of these ideas may help me. Because what I want is for you to support each other. What I'd also like for you to do, if you see something or if you do something that's really effective for you that you don't see on these lists, share it with your group and share it in the chat too with us when we come back, because we can all learn. On that slide I showed you that was, segmented into physical, emotional, and spiritual. And so the idea being here is I would really like for you to talk with your group about, the questions in that resilience worksheet. Identify 2 things that you'd like to do for yourself as soon as possible. And then identify 2 things you'd like to do for yourself sometime in the future. And also, if you have time, I'd like to talk with you about, just how do you handle stress? I mean, how have you been handling it? And, where can you go with that? I mean, are you feeling like, yeah, I'm handling it pretty good? And, and here are some new things I'm learning, or yeah, I'm not handling it that great. And here are some of the struggles I'm having. And, some of these ideas may help me, because what I want is for you to support each other. What I'd also like for you to do, if you see something or if you do something that's really effective for you that you don't see on these lists, share it with your group, and share it in the chat too with us when we come back, because we can all learn. I just want to touch upon support. In 2013, scientists looked at 6,500 people aged 50 and up and found that the most socially isolated people had a 26% greater risk of dying, even when sex, age, and other factors linked to survival were accounted for. Now, while being lonely certainly impacted the subjects, the scientists discovered that loneliness on its own didn't make people more vulnerable to death. The bottom line was that older people with fewer human contacts are more likely to die, even if they're happy in their solitude, than are people with richer social lives. And so that's kind of interesting, a little scary. But the good news is social support is an important factor for wellness and longevity. And social support is something we can do something about. Even if we're introverts, we can still get and seek out social support. So, and social support, I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of support. Emotional support is providing a listening ear, empathy, and the sense that one is cared about. A sense of belonging is the feeling that one is part of a family or another group that cares about its members. Instrumental support is the actual provision of services, meaning like maybe driving someone to the hospital, or caregiving, giving somebody pills, doing injections. And then informational support usually involves giving health-related information, such as advice on whether to seek medical care. And although there is obviously overlap between these categories, research suggests that emotional support has the most important influence on health outcomes. So emotional support is the most important. So this is an exercise for you to do at home on pages 18 to 21 of your handouts. And it's about identifying who in your life can provide the different kinds of support for you. It's important to go to the right people for the right things. For example, if I needed emotional support and I reached out to a family member who's not really very empathetic and who's instead kind of gruff and grumpy, like, I'm going to be very disappointed. I'm not going to get my need for support, emotional support met. If I go to a family member for financial support because I'm having a hard time paying my copays, but I go to a family member who has like no money, then I'm not going to get that need for support met. So it's important for us to match up the kinds of support we need with the support networks that we have. And it's a good idea to do this before we're in crisis, because it's really hard for us to think clearly when we're in the middle of a crisis. And I do want to point out here on the circle thing, we've got our social and professional systems on the outside that we can get different kinds of support from. We've got our extended family members, like my immediate family, and then of course taking care of me. And so these are some of the things. Notice I have walk on the beach. I can be my own sense of support, right? I can do these things to take care of myself, and then I can reach out to these other circles for other areas. And under social and professional systems, I've got CF Clinic Church, ladies groups, but we also have like Cassie and Friends, right? And I actually should have on here the CF Foundation, because that's a really great source of support. We could also have social networking on there. I mean, I don't know about you, but I do belong to some great groups on Facebook, and I get a lot of good support from those groups. So just to kind of give you an idea of how to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward now and just kind of run through a few more little coping skills, and then I'm going to end. So slowing down our minds and bodies with mindfulness, meditation, prayer, spiritual practices, and nature You've probably heard a lot about mindfulness. You can go on YouTube and get just do a Google mindfulness. And by the way, there's a lot of great mindfulness YouTube videos for kids. I mean, there's a lot of research. I mean, I could put so many citations up here for you about the value of mindfulness and meditation around stress and anxiety. This includes yoga, breath awareness, focusing on the breath, Tai Chi. All of these different practices are extremely healthy, both for body, mind, and soul. Changing our thought patterns, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. A CBT therapist will help you redirect your unhelpful thoughts, change the story you're telling yourself, focus on the positive and start instead of negative self-talk. Using a calming phrase, like as a parent, one of the calming phrases that I would use when I was really struggling with a kid who was like really pushing my buttons is like, I would say to myself, I love this kid. I love this kid. I love this kid. I love this kid. Because I just wanted to remind myself that this is my kid. I love this kid. I don't want to react in a way that's going to hurt that relationship, right? Or the other one that I would use is it's only a stage. It's only a stage. It's only a stage. It's only a stage. When, that I just would remind me like, okay, we're going to get through this and tomorrow will be a better day. So those are some of the ways that I've done that. And then creating meaning. I'm going to end upon this topic of creating meaning. Is particularly an important one for me. Suffering can ignite the drive to find a sense of meaning. Creating meaning can be a primary path to healing, coping, and resiliency. One of my very favorite authors of all time is Viktor Frankl, and he wrote the book called Man's Search for Meaning. And if you've never read it, I highly, highly, highly recommend. I think it's one of the best selling books in history. And he was a 20th century psychiatrist, and he worked with Sigmund Freud and Alfred Adler, but he kind of went at the idea of psychology a little bit differently. He went at it from the perspective of meaning, that life is about meaning. Dr. Frankl's life experiences as a Nazi concentration camp survivor had a profound influence on his work. And through that journey, he theorized that there are 3 ways to create meaning in our lives: through love, through meaningful work, and through suffering. And of course, other sources, including Walsh, Strengthening Family Resilience, talk about the role of faith, religion, and spirituality, which Viktor Frankl does too. And I kind of lump that under love because that is kind of like love of God, in my mind. That's how I kind of lump that together for him. So his work has been very meaningful to me over the years as I have found ways to cope emotionally and spiritually with having 2 now young adults with cystic fibrosis. Their diagnosis was a very dark time for me personally, and it took me a really long time to rebuild my shattered dreams and to find hope and meaning in this experience of having kids with CF. But we did as a family, and of course we're an ongoing, work in process. But then in April of 2015, now 6 years ago, my husband had a heart attack and passed away unexpectedly. And I discovered then how true all of the things are that I've been teaching you, and how powerful all these things are that I've been teaching you can be to help us weather the hardest of times. When my husband passed, I thought the hardest thing I had ever gone through was to have those words, "I'm sorry your child has cystic fibrosis." But it was equal to the day that the doctor said, "I'm sorry, but your husband has passed." And so this was our last picture together as a family in downtown Seattle, just weeks before he passed away. And it was a kind of a cloudy-ish day in Seattle, and kind of a little partly rainy, partly sunny, and everyone was really busy. It was like in March, and I remember we were all busy. Everyone was running around, homework and work, blah, 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 on a weekend, and I'm like, everybody, we need to have fun together as a family. Groan, Mom, we don't have time. No. And I'm like, please, the sun came out. There's a little bit of sun. Let's go enjoy the sun. And I'm like, please, let's just go down to Pike Place Market. I mean, I'll buy you a donut for my son. He loves the fresh donuts. And my daughter, I'll buy you the salmon jerky. And my husband, I'll buy you coffee. Like, come on, like bribing them. Like, let's go do something as a family. And I'm so glad that I did. And a kind stranger snapped this picture of us. And so whenever you're out taking pictures, always offer, because you never know how much meaning that may have to somebody. But anyway, a kind stranger said, hey, can I take one of all of you? And they did. And this was the last picture that we had together. And I'm forever grateful both to that stranger, but also, to just stopping and smelling the roses and taking the time to be together as a family and to create memories and to have joy together. And we really did a good job of that. And I'm really proud of that. Even in the busyness, we really did try to do that. And it was because of cystic fibrosis that we did. And it's hard to believe that it was because of cystic fibrosis that we really worked much harder at being, a strong family and having fun together and creating good memories. It's kind of ironic that, that it was my husband's passing that we benefited from all those memories and pictures. And so, like perhaps some of you here, I have found meaning in my adversity. I've learned that I'm resilient. I've learned that I can cope with hard times. It hasn't been easy. It's been that up and down and crazy, crazy journey. It still is sometimes. I mean, I still cry. It's hard. The shattered dreams don't go away. But I'm able to help others with what I've learned and experienced. I'm able to be here with you. And I hope that that's something I shared with you here today and that you've shared with each other has brought some meaning and some hope and some joy and some light into your life. I've learned that I can make a difference in the world with what I've gone through. And the beauty of this is that when I model this in my own life, my kids are also learning from my example, and they also are beautiful lights out in the world. They've learned resilience as well. They're happy, they're well adjusted, they're doing well in college, they have lots of friends, they have full, rich lives. They have many dreams for the future. My son is graduating from college, I mentioned, in about 2 weeks, and he actually is going to Stanford University, which is, I'm sure you've heard of it, maybe, I don't know, but it's a great university here in California. And he wants to be a doctor, so he's going to be applying for medical school. And my daughter she's got one more year in college at our local University of Washington. So, they've discovered unexpected blessings in our challenges, including things like perseverance and empathy and gratitude and courage and hope. And they've walked with their own friends who have lost a parent and who have had diagnoses and who have had struggles. And every time I look into their eyes, I see my husband, Carl. I see the memories that we've had and that we have and the love that we shared together for 20 years. And as I said, it's not easy by any means, but it is possible to bounce forward. It is possible to be resilient, to dream new dreams. Because I believe, for me, those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. And the thing that keeps me going is the reminder that these 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. And love is free. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to open up the floor to questions. And I'm going to, let's see, go to my next slide. There we go. Here is my contact information. If you want to connect with me, feel free. And I think I'm going to turn off the slides now so that, let me show you my list of references just so you know that there's a lot of them. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and then we can see each other, and then Jen can moderate our conversation.
That's great. Thank you so much, Lisa, for being so vulnerable in sharing your story and all of the love that you bring to what you do. I hope everyone had a really meaningful chance to connect with another or others in your breakout rooms. And I think what I'll suggest right now is if everyone changes their view, if you just make sure you're on gallery view, and then you'll be able to see everyone's faces together, for those of you that have your camera on. And of course, it's absolutely optional. We're going to start the Q&A, and this is your chance to ask Lisa, talk about experiences, etc. And you can either use the chat box, or since I have it on gallery view, as long as your camera is open, if you raise your hand, I'll be able to call on you by name, and you can either type your question, or if you feel comfortable to turn your mic on, then feel free to do that as well. So why don't we get started with one question that already came through while everyone kind of thinks of what they'd like to ask. And Lisa, this question was from a parent. It was submitted before the session, but the question was, what should we do when our kids see our emotions? So this parent in particular was upset by some news at their rheumatology appointment and cried, and then felt bad after for crying in front of their child. And how can you, what do you suggest, and what do you think the parent should maybe say to themselves and their child after?
Yeah, so I mean, these moments that come up are some of the best teaching moments that we can have for our children. And so we can always go back and say afterwards, like, oh, did you notice that mommy was crying, had some tears? I mean, and depending on the age of the kid, right? I'm assuming this is a young kid. Oh, did you notice mommy had tears? Oh, I did notice, mommy. Yeah, mommy was feeling really sad for a moment there. Really, mommy, you were sad? Yeah, mommies get sad too. Do you ever feel sad? Oh, I feel sad sometimes, mommy. Does getting a hug help you when you're sad? Getting a hug helps me when I'm sad, mommy. Well, getting a hug helps me too. Mommies get sad just like kids get sad. So, we don't have to necessarily give them reasons why we were sad. We can just let them know it's okay to be sad. Mommies get sad, daddies get sad. It's okay to be sad. And, we can share some of the things that help us feel better when we're sad. Maybe it's a hug. Maybe it's looking out the window. We can vicariously teach good coping skills to our children. If they ask, why were you sad? Then we can be honest. We can just say, yeah, the doctor was just sharing some things that, that just made me sad. And it's okay. We're gonna cope with it. It's all good, but it's just a change that mommy's having to deal with, and we'll get through it. I mean, that's sort of my approach, is to just kind of address it, kind of say, yeah, there was some information that was hard. We have to do a new medication, but it's going to be okay, and just be honest about it. And I do a whole. Like I could do like a whole hour. I mean, if ever, this comes up, I mean, I could do a whole hour on how to like talk with kids about difficult issues. I mean, I have a whole workshop that I can do, like, with like children's books that, help us teach our kids about their condition and the language to use, and some audios that we can do before and after, ways of talking with our kids that actually, elicit their feelings about tough issues rather than shut them down. But that's sort of the not so short answer.
That's great. Thank you. I'll just maybe open it up here if anyone has a question they'd like to ask. Maybe I'll give them a second to warm up. And there was another question that came through, and that was, what should I do if to support my son if he's refusing his medication?
Yeah, that's another whole workshop. So in a nutshell, empathy is always a good first response, like trying to figure out why, right? But before we can go into a problem solving conversation, we want to validate the feelings, right? I mean, there's some kind of resistance there. What's going on? Why isn't this kid wanting to take the medication? I remember a time when my daughter didn't want to do her breathing treatments, and she was just being really stubborn and resistant, and I'm like, what is going on? So I started kind of talking with her about it. And it's hard to like just kind of say, why don't you want to do it? Like, I mean, it really matters how we say it. We don't want to come through like we're an interrogator, or like because, we can put them on the defensive right away, But if we just if we're really genuinely curious and interested and in our heart, and we're just like, you know what, honey, I'm just really curious. So like, I mean, you've been doing this for a while. So, what's up? Did something change, or is something happening that's different for you? Or what, can you help me understand, what's happening with you, and why you're not feeling comfortable, taking your meds, why you don't want to do it? And then I'll kind of say, I know how important this is. I mean, this, you're a smart girl. So I'm just wondering what's causing you to make this choice, help me understand. We kind of say it that way, like with a pure heart of really wanting to understand, they're more willing to open up. And so for my daughter, it was really actually kind of interesting. And it taught me a really big lesson. It was sort of simple because she said, Mommy, I don't like the taste. Actually, the brand had changed and the taste was really bad, and it would make her like gag and kind of almost want to throw up. And so I didn't realize that because she just wasn't, she didn't express that. And so we came up with a plan. We came up with like some, a list of 3 different possible solutions to solve the problem. So there's like a whole problem solving model that you can kind of go through where you make a suggestion and you ask them, how would that work for you? So it's like, well, what could we do? I mean, could you, maybe you could plug your nose, because plugged noses help us not taste things. How would that work? Okay, well, I'll try it. And it didn't work. And then it was like, oh, well, okay. How about, she ended up putting a lemon head. I don't know if you've heard of lemon heads, but they're a little tiny hard candy. She ended up tucking one of them in her cheek while she would do it. And, she was able to do it without choking on it or whatever. But I mean, but it just gave her enough flavor, right? Because the lemon head's kind of sour and sweet, and it overcame the taste. And so then kind of once she got used to it, then she was cool. I mean, and that taught me a big lesson, because like I would be more like, why don't you want to do this, or what's wrong? And like, right, like that parent going like, yeah. And I realized about myself, like what's going on behind that is because it scares me, right? When my kid refuses to take their meds, like it scares me. I think, oh no, like, are they going to get sick? Are they doing this behind my back? Is it going to get worse? I mean, my mind just goes there. And like for me, I mean, that's me. That's my anxiety talking, right? My fear based, like catastrophizing. So, by taking a deep breath and talking down, like, okay, this is one breathing treatment. I don't have to project into the future, the rest of our life she's quitting. I just have to deal with this one breathing treatment today, right? The next dose. And let's see if we can do some problem solving. So, okay, quick parenting 101 in 2 minutes.
I'll look for a hand up. There was one other question that came through, but I just want to give anyone a chance if they wanted to jump in. Okay, this question that came through was kind of made me laugh, because I think we all do this a little bit, but the question was why sometimes when I'm sad or scared or something with my child, does it come out as maybe anger to someone else, like my partner?
Yeah. Yeah, I know, right? The old saying is true, right? We have a bad day at work, we come home, we kick the dog, we yell at the kids, it bubbles out, right? It just bubbles out. I mean, and that's stress and frustration. I mean, and emotions they're not really necessarily just pure, right? I mean, sadness isn't always just pure sadness. I mean, sadness can be mixed in with anxiety and stress and frustration. And what that tells me is that this person is really just overloaded. I mean, right? If you think about our lives, we can so easily become overloaded and just, it's the old, the straw that broke the camel's back, right? I mean, we just, we carry so much on our shoulders as moms and dads and caregivers. I mean, we've got so much. It's so hard just to be a parent, right? I mean, just to be a parent, like it is the hardest job we will ever do. And it's the one we are least prepared for or trained for, right? And so we just aren't prepared. And then we're having to carry so much, and we only have so much time we've got. In modern day life is so, everything is expensive. I mean, I don't mean to depress us all, but I mean, these are the realities, right? We're all these little hamsters on wheels. And so no wonder we're having a hard time. And it's not just this person, right? I mean, so time management is important, learning how to say no, setting good boundaries, protecting your space. And that's why self-care is so important, right? Because like taking even just 5 minutes for yourself. So Jen was sharing with me like her self-care thing that she just recently started. Jen, you tell it.
Which one? I think I
The
need
morning.
Oh, morning. So I've been setting my alarm much earlier than I'd like to get up, but I find it just makes such a difference to have like a time I can sit with coffee and like do not before lunches, before doing their hair and picking their outfits and all of the other stuff, just to sit on my own and have that time in the morning. And I find that makes a huge difference once they wake up.
Yeah. So you have even just like 5 minutes of Jen time, just Jen time, like, and not be, checking the email and checking, right? Just sit with the cup of coffee and I mean, look out the window. I mean, there's so much research about the positive effects of nature and the color green on our brains. I mean, we're biological. We are biology. I mean, we're much more, right? We're also spirit and all that, but we're biology, and we need nature. We need it. It calms us. It brings our vibration down. Stress. So yeah.
We had another question come in. So this is a parent of a 9-year-old daughter. And she says she wants to model self-care to her daughter, but not necessarily self-comfort. And she was asking how she could simply explain the difference to her daughter and teach her to do the same. And I don't know if you need a little more information on
that. I guess I'm not sure the difference. I mean, self-comfort, meaning like when we have emotions and we're feeling a little bit out of control, we comfort ourselves. I'm thinking maybe.
I wonder if it's like
I don't mind talking about it.
Okay, great.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yay.
So it's something that I was sort of exploring a concept during the pandemic because, for the first few months it was like, oh my gosh, it's a pandemic. Like, let's bake banana bread and buy chocolate, and for me, drink wine and drink gin, and it's a lot of physical comforts. So which is okay once in a while, but 15 months later, I had to make the distinction. Okay, is this self-care? For me, self-care might be putting the glass down, putting down the milkshake, whatever, and going for a walk. Mm-hmm. So for me, there's a huge difference between self-care and self-comfort.
Yeah, brilliantly said.
And neither, like, self-comfort isn't wrong. It's just, it's not as sustainable as true self-care.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's like, how do I simplify that? Right?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think you can explain it like that. I mean, self-comfort is more, I think, materialistic and external, right? I mean, and like you said, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we all love shopping therapy, but you can't sustain that. I mean, like, unless you're like Bill Gates or whatever, but right. I mean, and I mean, ultimately it isn't good for the long run. Right. And so,
like getting up, like, I forget, it's Jess, but getting up early, that's definitely self-care, but it might not be comfort, because comfort would be.
Yeah. Because I would say, the self-comfort is sort of the word is hedonistic pleasures, which are nice and can help. I mean, we all love a massage, but on the other hand, I mean, the self-care is deeper than that. And I think I mean, just thinking it through with you, I think the self-care aspect has a more spiritual, emotional, I think it may be a more spiritual meaning-based thing. I mean, for me anyway, like, I mean, and we're all wired differently, right? And
Yeah.
so, but, you know, we all get meaning. There's that big piece of meaning, I think, especially with this journey that we have, even just as parents. I mean, take out the chronic illness piece, right? I mean, we need to have a sense of meaning and purpose about what we do, and you know, the grind. I mean, especially those of you with young children. I mean, God bless you. It's hard raising young children, you know, and it's a grind. It's lonely. It can, you know, it's just hard. And you've got to have meaning and a sense of purpose that that sustains your spirit during those times that you're looking at the house and the diapers and the dishes, and you're just like, what it just happened to me, you know? And so, you know, but that sense of meaning, and that you're building the future, and that you're, you know, I mean, you have to find your own, right? I mean, that's what's a little bit of a challenge. But, you know, like Jen, I mean, she's, I don't mean to speak for you, but those moments that she's sitting there taking time for herself, I don't know, maybe you could speak to that. Do you reflect? Are you, you know, I mean, what are you able to get a sense of purpose and meaning for your day? Or, I mean, is there any spiritual piece of that for you, like in the meaning and purpose area? Or,
I mean, for me, and maybe that's the spiritual component of it, it is the silence. And so I don't bring my phone even into the room I'm in, because I will be drawn to email and will start working. So it's really forcing myself to just sit and just be, which is meditative in its own right.
Perfect.
I really try not to think at all, actually.
Yeah. And that is spiritual. That, I mean, that's huge. I mean, and that's incredibly healing. So yeah, it's an individual journey. That's a great question.
Like a really good question.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think that is all the time we have for today. But if anyone has any questions following this session, please do email us. You can email info@cassieandfriends.ca, and we would be so happy to follow up with you after the session. I want to say thank you again so much to Lisa. This was just a wonderful presentation, and I hope you go into the chat box and read all the thanks that have been directed your way, for your time, for your information, your learning, and your lived experience. That's really what makes our community so special and strong. And so just thank you for being a part of that. I also just want to thank everyone who's here today and spent this time with us tonight. I'm going to quickly share my screen and just say a few closing words about next steps. It always happens a little more automatically, but it doesn't. So as that comes over, Lisa touched on a really important part of her presentation tonight. And that is that sometimes emotions can become more than we can handle. And she provided, you know, a great list, and I think it's in your handouts, of some signs that it might be wise to seek help or other resources. And so we have some resources listed here. They're also on our website. We have under our resource page a mental health tab. And we also have a past recording of a session with Dr. Penny Snedden, who's a psychologist from BC Children's Hospital. And she was focused more on the feelings in children, anxiety and depression in children with rheumatic disease. So that might be helpful, but some great learning as well. And then we've included some of the resources, including Anxiety Canada that Lisa pointed out before, and the suicide prevention hotline. So these are, you know, good resources to have on our radar, both for ourselves and for our loved ones at all times. And we just wanted to make sure to mention those. One last thank you to our sponsors. We are so proud and privileged to be able to coordinate these sessions and bring this kind of information to both youth and families. And finally, for the very next steps, please do fill out your survey. You're going to receive an email, and it just really helps us to know if these sessions are useful to you and what other sessions you would like. We're taking a little break for the summer, so we will be starting back up in September, and that's a really great time to get some feedback on sessions as we start planning. Team Cassie and Friends is in full effect across Canada, and I really encourage everyone, especially during this pandemic, to use this as a great opportunity to do some self-care in the form of setting a goal, getting active. It's also something amazing that you can share with your family. I know all of us are probably having the same war with screen time and our kids during the pandemic, and this is just a really positive, fun way to be a part of the community and find a sense of belonging in working together to achieve the future we'd like to see for our kids. And lastly, I know everyone had like a great opportunity to meet others in the breakout session. So the online support network is a really great place to keep that communication happening. And if anyone also just wants to reach out, again, info@cassieandfriends.ca. We're happy to help you connect. These are all our social channels, and our website is cassieandfriends.ca. And lastly, we always appreciate support for those of you who believe in our work and are always welcome, not only in the form of financial contributions, but time and information and experience, and even just helping other parents as well. So thank you, everyone. And I hope you have an amazing rest of your weekend. And thanks again, Lisa. It was so nice to spend this time with you.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.